Good morning, Year 6. Today is the 26th of the 6th, 2020, and today we're looking at solving ratio and proportion problems. So I'd like you to pause the video here, write down our date in the numerical date, the date in Roman numerals, and the learning intention. And let's get started. So, by the end of today's lesson, you should be able to use a bar model to calculate parts. I know you're all familiar with the bar model now, 100% you should be. And you should be able to recall learning from earlier in the week, as well as apply your problem-solving skills to today's learning. And for some of you, you'll be able to convert a written question into a bar model. As usual, you will need your pencil, you will need a paper, you'll need the right attitude and your thinking hats on, logic and method, and you will need the worksheet that was emailed to you this morning alongside a 5-minute timer. Make sure you've got all of those items and we'll begin. So for our starter today, we're going to have a go at answering the questions shown on screen. We've got 9 questions, and before you start, I just want you to look at number 5 where it says round 4.639 to 1 dp. Have a think about what 1 dp might mean if we're rounding. That's right, we're talking about decimal places. So that question is asking you to round 4.639 to 1 decimal place. And before you begin, when we're talking about the range, we're looking at the lowest value, the difference from the lowest value to the greatest value. So think about how you'd use that to help you answer question 6. So pause the video, 5-minute timer, and off you go. Brilliant. Let's go through the answers. For number 1, the answer is 55, remembering the rules of BIDMAS. Number 2, our answer is 3/10. For number 3, we've got 0.7, which should be written as 7/10, or you might have written it as 70 over 100. That's okay as well. However, 7/10 is in its simplest form. So do try and have a go at always just making sure you've written things in their simplest form as you go into secondary school. For number 4, a third of 21 is equal to 17 minus 10, and that was an inverse question. For number 5, the answer is 4.6, because if we just look at 6 and 3, 63, that would be rounded down to 60, so that becomes 4.6. The range is the difference between the lowest value and the greatest value, so the lowest value there is 12, and the greatest value there is 35. And if we do 35, take away 12, we get 23. Find 2/9 of 36. So first of all, you have to find 1/9, which is 4, and then times that by 2 to get 8. Which of these is prime? So you have to go through and think, which of these have I not said in any of my times tables? And then if you think about that just off the top of your head, you should be able to recognize that 57 and 53 are both prime numbers. And you can test it out and see if you can divide it by any numbers. We know straight off the top of our head, 33, we know that's divisible by 11, divisible by 3. 45, we know it ends in 5, so it must be divisible by 5. And you can work your way through it like that. You know 49 is in the 7 times tables. You'll know that 69, you might not know 69 so well, but 69, if we did 23 times 3, we'd get 69. So that is divisible by 3. So the only two there are 57 and 53. What is the difference between 6,000 and 60? If you wrote, oh, the difference is that one's got 3 zeros and one's got 0, that's wrong. When we're talking about the difference, we're talking about how much between one number to the other. So the difference between 6,000 and 60 is 5,940. You could have subtracted 60 from 6,000 to find your answer. Now, let's have a go at answering this question. Well, I want you to have a go at doing it yourself, and then we'll go through the answers. So pause the video and answer both of the questions shown on screen. Remember to show your working. That's really, really important because it might help to get a mark. It means that when we look through your work, you sometimes might say, oh, although the answer's wrong, I can see where they've gone wrong in their calculations. Brilliant. Let's go through the answers. It says peanuts cost 60p for 100 grams. What is the cost of 350 grams of peanuts? Well, we can use that information there to help us. We're not given the price for 350 grams, but we are given the price of 100. We're going to have to partition that number, 350, to help us. We know that if we partition it into 350, that can help us. We can work out that 300 grams would cost 180p, because 60 times 3 gives us 180. And we know that 300 is 3 times 100. But we need to know how much 350 grams costs. So we still need to work out how much would 50 grams cost. Well, 50 grams is half of 100 grams. So we half our 60p. Half of 60p is 30p. So we add that to the total amount that we had before. And we end up with 180 plus 30p, which gives us 210 pence, or £2.10. Either one of those are correct, so well done if you managed to get those. Let's have a go at the second question. It says raisins cost 80p for 100 grams. Jack pays £2 for a bag of raisins. How many grams of raisins does he get? So this one is similar, but instead of us working out the cost, here we're working out how many grams of raisins he was able to buy with £2. So imagine you went into a shop and they were selling raisins and all you had in your pocket was £2. You'd have to decide how much you're able to buy and whether it's worth it, whether you'll have enough to be able to do the recipe that you want to do when you get home. So here we can work out that if ACP is 100 grams, then we know he has enough for 200 grams because that's 160p. We double the amount, we double the 80 and we get 160, double the 100 and we get 200 grams. But he's still got 40p left over. How many more raisins could he afford? Well, we know that 40p is half of 80p. So that means he can afford half of 100 grams. Half of 100 grams is 50 grams. So altogether, Jack has enough money to buy 250 grams of raisins. Yummy. Let's have a look at another one together. What is the ratio of tomato to pepper? What is the whole, and how do we find one part? So I want you to pause the video here and have a go at answering the questions shown. Brilliant. So the ratio of tomato to pepper, that's quite an easy one. We've got 3 to 2. What is the whole? Well, we just put those two numbers together and we get 5. So we know there's 5 parts altogether. And how do we find one part? Well, we need to do 225 because we're trying to work out if we have 225 grams, how much one part is worth. So we do 225 divided by 5, which gives us 45. Now, if we wanted to go into even more detail on that question, we could find out that the total for the tomatoes would be 3 times 45, because we now know that we have to multiply it by 5 to get 225. So 3 times 45, which equals 135. And the total number of peppers would be 2 times 45, which is 90. So our ratio would be 135 to 90. On the screen, you'll see the ingredients for some chocolate ice cream. Stefan has only 300 milliliters of cream to make chocolate ice cream. He hasn't got enough. Or he can get creative and he can think about, well, if I haven't got enough for this recipe, then maybe I could just try and have less of each ingredient to try and make my chocolate ice cream. He's going to have to think about how much is shown in the recipe and how much he has and alter the recipe so he can still make some delicious chocolate ice cream. How much chocolate should he use if he only has 300 milliliters of cream? Well, I want you to pause the video and have a go at working this one out. Super, let's go through the answers. 400 minus a quarter of 400. We know a quarter of 400 is 100. So 400 minus a quarter of 400 equals 300. So now we know he needs to minus a quarter of each of the other items on his recipe or in his ingredients list. So the question asks us, how much chocolate should he use? If we look at the chocolate, we know that a quarter of 120 is 30, because 120 divided by 4 gives us 30. So if we minus that 30 from 120, we get 90. So that tells us that he should use 90 grams of chocolate. 2 matchsticks have the same length as 3 bottle tops. You can see that shown on the diagram. How many bottle tops will have the same length as 50 matchsticks? Pause the video here and work out your answer. So, let's go through it. The ratio of matchsticks to bottle tops is 2 to 3. 2 matchsticks to every 3 bottle tops. If I now have 50 matchsticks, then that means I've done 2 times 25 to get 50. Or I might work that out by doing 50 divided by 2 to find 25. So now I know that I've got 25 times more than we have shown on screen. Whatever I multiply one side of our ratio by, I must multiply the other side by 2. So just as I did 2 times 25 to get 50, I now must do 3 times 25, which gives me 75. So he'll need 75 bottle tops. And our new ratio would be 50 to 75. Let's have a look at another one together. Mari is the presenter of a weekly radio show. Now, she's got all different listeners, some young, some old, so she tries to mix it up a little bit. She says to herself, she's always going to play 5 new songs for every 2 old songs, so that the older listeners are kept interested and the younger listeners too. Last week, she played 15 new songs. So, using her ratio, we need to work out using that ratio of 5 to 2, we need to work out how many songs she played altogether. Before we work out how many songs she played altogether, we need to work out how many old songs she played altogether. So, if our ratio is 5 to 2, we know that she has gone from playing, in fact, I haven't given you time to write down your answer. Pause the video and have a go at working this out yourself. Brilliant. Now we can go through it together. Our ratio is shown on screen, 5 to 2. We know last week she played 15 new songs, so that means she played 3 times 5. 5 times 3, which gives us 15. We could also do that as 15 divided by 5 to get 3. So now we know we're multiplying by 3. We do the same with the old songs, the 2 old songs that she used to play. We also multiply that by 3. 2 times 3 equals 6. So our new ratio is 15 to 6. Now we know in order to find how many she played altogether, we need to add those numbers. So 15 plus 6 gives us 21. Our answer is 21. Now, don't worry, we're nearly finished and you can get on and do your independent tasks. Have a look at the information shown on screen. The recipe to make soup for 6 people is given, but how much of each ingredient will be needed to make the soup for 3 people, 9 people, or 1 person? So this happens quite often. You might have a recipe that you're following in a book and it says this recipe is suitable for 4 people, but you've got a house full of 8 people. And you have to think about how you can adapt the recipe to be able to feed all of the people that you need to feed. So I want you to pause the video here and then write down how much of each ingredient will be needed to make the soup for each of these. If you're doing some division, you might need to use the bus stop method, but each question kind of lends itself to the next. So think about how you can use that. Pause the video here and in a moment I'll give you the answers. Excellent. So, if you were creating this recipe for 3 people, you would need half an onion, you would need 30 grams of butter, 1 tablespoon of plain flour, 1.2 litres of stock and 240 millilitres of tomato juice. So in order to do that, you just had to halve everything shown on our recipe, because we know that 3 is half of 6. Now, if you were doing this for 9 people, we know we've got a recipe for 6 people in front of us, and we just created a recipe for 3 people. 6 plus 3 makes, that's right, it makes 9. So we can just add those two together. Instead of 1 onion, we need 1.5 onions. Instead of 60 grams of butter, we need 90 grams of butter. Instead of 2 tablespoons of plain flour, we need 3 tablespoons of plain flour. Instead of 2.4 litres of stock, we need 3.6 litres of stock. So we had to do 2.4 plus 1.2. And instead of 480 millilitres of tomato juice, we need 480 plus 240, which gives us 720 millilitres of tomato juice. Now, the trickiest one here was finding out how much you would need for one person, because we know that one person is just going to be, we need to take our recipe for 6 and divide it by 6. So instead of 1 onion, you need 1/6 of an onion. Instead of 60 grams of butter, we need 10 grams of butter. And instead of 2 tablespoons, that's 2 whole, we need just 1/3 of a tablespoon. Instead of 2.4 litres of stock, we divide that by 6, we get 0.4. So 24 divided by 6, which is 4. And instead of 480 millilitres of tomato juice, we only need 80 millilitres of tomato juice. 480 divided by 6. So well done if you managed to get all of those correct. So I'm going to stop there and hand this over to you. On screen, you will see the worksheet that was emailed to you this morning. I'd like you to have a go at answering the questions. You can draw bar models or draw out the problem, or if you can just work it out quite quickly, you can do that as well. But think carefully about how you'll solve them. So for example, the first question says find the cost of 1 pen from each shop. So you have to think, well, how much would I need to pay for 1 pen? What will I use to help me there? Making sure you're answering each of the questions carefully and thoroughly and checking your answers again and again. Once you've done all of that, then I would like you to email us your work at yr6@grange.harrow.sch.uk. Have an amazing day and have a fantastic weekend. And I look forward to seeing you all logged in, ready for your learning on Monday. Bye.